Alright y'all, let's make this channel setting. I'm going to start this project with my Swanstem tools, primarily my needle nose and my snips. About 5 inches of 20 gauge square and 5 inches of 20 gauge half round, and we'll work our 28 gauge round off the spool. The first step here is to bind your 20 gauge square wires with your 28 gauge round. I usually go over them about 3 times, and then I'll go ahead and tuck my tail, snip it. From there, we'll get ready to lay on our 20 gauge half round wires and bind them also with the 28 gauge round on top of the 20 gauge square. So again, I'll go over them 3 times. I had to wiggle a little here to get them flat on top of the square, and that's pretty normal. So don't ever be hard on yourself. If the wires want to flip in your hands, it's a whole learning process, right? So once I've got the flat sides down, I lay them on top of those square wires and go ahead back in with the 28 gauge round and wrap around them 3 times. I always try to make sure to keep these coils nice and tight and compressed so that we have a tight element here. The next step is going to be to take those half round wires and wrap them around the tails of the square wires so that they stay in place. The last thing you want is these top wires slipping around. They're going to hold your stones in. So if they're not anchored on these tails, they'll slip out and you end up with loose settings. Nobody wants that, right? So snip your ends, get everything nice and tight on those wires, and then we're going to turn it around and start working on setting the stones. And give me a second here. I didn't cut this edit at all, so I'm going to fast forward through pulling the stones out of the box and getting them ready to go here. These are 2 to 2.5 millimeter bubblegum pink sapphires, and I just pulled out 3 that were about the same size. And we're going to go ahead here, open those square wires at the bottom, and then we're going to make this little, it's almost like a square or a diamond shape. We're going to make little points, spread those wires out, and then pull them back together to leave this open space that our stone will be able to slide into. The little point of the facet is going to go down in that opening. And then we'll take those top half round wires and match them up. I put my needle nose into the little hole I made and use that to hold the half round so that I can bend it around the part of my needle nose that's sticking up through that hole. See that shape it makes? And then we'll lift that up, drop our stone in there, and lay it back down again. Sometimes this happens really smoothly, and other times it takes a little fidgeting. The first one's always the hardest. The wires are not secured or stable yet, and there's just a little more wiggling involved, but here we go. We're going to wrap that 28 gauge around. We'll pull it so that it comes up to the top of that setting, and then wrap it around. I just do twice in between the settings. 3 times at the start and finish of the channel, but I just do twice in between them. Get everything nice and tight, slid down in there again, and then we'll lift up the half round wires and do it again. Open up the 20 gauge, square at the bottom, and make your little, like I said, it's kind of a square or a triangle shape where you bend the wires out and then you move up a little ways and bend them back in toward one another, and then close them up and get them side by side again. Boop. And then we'll set those half round wires where they'll be able to lay on top of them so that we can hold the edges of our table of our stone into the setting. Now this is just a 3-stone setting, so once we get this stone in, we're a little over halfway done with the work that we needed to do here. I'm proud of you for sticking it out. I hope that you're following along and making one for yourself. Leave me a note in the comments if you still have questions. All right, so we'll lay that down, trap that little bugger, and see how much easier it was the second time. And we'll go twice around all 4 wires with that 28 gauge again. It's always good to make little adjustments as you go. You can't make them later. I always like to squeeze those wires all down nice and tight. Make sure those facets aren't going to go anywhere. They're itty bitty stones. All right, one more time. We lift up those half round wires, open up the square wires, close them back in on one another. Now my tools are from Swanstrom, but you can get an inexpensive tool set from Walmart or Michaels or Amazon. Edelon tools are relatively inexpensive, and they're what I started with. They were perfectly sufficient for a beginner, and I definitely could have been working with them longer. They're harder on your hands than the higher end tools. Next step up, I would say I really enjoyed my Xerons. Xerons have great needle nose pliers. My Swanstroms are just a hair stronger. Swanstrom tools are incredible, but they're very expensive. So they're definitely something to get yourself when you're feeling like you're starting to be maybe a professional. I bought mine after I finished my Closey deal as a reward to myself for making 300 pendants for my favorite musician. They're wonderful if you have the spare money to be able to go ahead and dive in on high-end tools. They definitely make the work easier. All right, so now that we have that final channel setting made, that final stone set, we're going to go in and tighten everything down, make sure everything is nice and secure. And like I said, I went over those wires 3 times at the end just to make a nice secure ending. And then we'll lift up the half round and go 3 times over just the square wires, and then tie in the ends of the half round so that the piece is symmetrical, right? So that the component looks the same at both ends, regardless of which way that you turn it, except for the tails are a little bit longer on the end I was working toward. Snip that little tail off after those 3 rounds with the 28 gauge. Pull those half round wires up through the middle, get them nice and flat, and then take your tails around the square wire so that it's nice and anchored. And again, if these half round wires aren't anchored well, then the top of your setting will move around and your stones will have the potential to slip out, and we don't want that. So I anchor those 3 times, get them snipped, tighten them down real good, and that's it. We've now successfully completed a full 3-stone channel setting. I hope that you've enjoyed this process. I hope that you feel like you've learned something. And I hope you'll go check out my social media pages where I've posted the piece that this channel setting went into, or hopefully maybe you enjoyed the live on TikTok where we finished the piece together. I can't wait to see you guys again next week. I'm not sure what we'll do. Maybe coils? Leave me something in the comments and let me know what you'd like to see and learn, okay? Thank you for bearing with me through my very first full-length tutorial. There it is. Have a good one, y'all. Happy weaving.